This is the most disrespectful, cold-blooded thing I've seen in WWE in years, and it perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with the every man for himself mentality that's infected the locker room. Brock Lesnar, the same man who claims to respect the Steiner family legacy, who's benefited from the brotherhood and loyalty that comes from being part of a wrestling dynasty, stood there and watched CM Punk absolutely brutalize Bron Breakker backstage at Raw and did absolutely nothing to help. He didn't intervene. He didn't step in. He didn't even pretend to care. Brock Lesnar just stood there with his arms crossed, watching a fellow wrestler who happens to be the nephew of his former tag team partner get beaten within an inch of his life, and when Bron desperately looked at Brock for help, Brock turned around and walked away. And what makes this even more infuriating is that WWE is framing this as some kind of tough love moment, like Brock is teaching Bron a lesson about standing on his own 2 feet. No. This is betrayal. This is abandonment. And this is exactly why the locker room culture in WWE is broken. Let me paint the full picture for you because the context of what happened makes Brock's refusal to help even worse than it initially sounds. Raw is backstage, and Bron Breakker is in a heated argument with CM Punk. The tension between these two has been building for weeks. Punk has been vocal about his opinion that Bron hasn't earned his spot, that he's only champion because of his family name, and that the Steiner legacy doesn't mean anything in the modern era. Bron, understandably, takes offense to this and has been firing back, defending his family and his accomplishments. The verbal sparring has been entertaining, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before things got physical. So there's Bron, face to face with CM Punk, and the argument is escalating quickly. Punk is doing what he does best, getting under Bron's skin with perfectly crafted insults that cut deep. He's questioning Bron's toughness, his intelligence, his worthiness of carrying the Steiner name. Bron is getting visibly angry, his fists are clenched, and you can see he's about 2 seconds away from throwing the first punch. But Bron is also smart enough to know that CM Punk is a veteran who's been in countless fights and confrontations. Punk knows every trick in the book. So Bron is exercising restraint, trying to handle this verbally rather than physically. That's when Brock Lesnar appears. He walks into the frame, and for a moment, you think this is about to be a game changer. Brock has history with both Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner. The Steiners and Brock came up through the same era and circles in the wrestling world. There's a connection there, a respect that should exist between Brock and anyone with Steiner blood. So when Brock shows up, the immediate assumption is that he's going to have Bron's back, that he's going to even the odds and make CM Punk think twice about continuing this confrontation. Bron even acknowledges Brock's presence, giving him a look that clearly says, "I've got backup now." CM Punk also notices Brock, and for a split second, you can see Punk reassessing the situation. Punk is fearless, but he's not stupid. Going up against Bron Breakker is one thing. Going up against Bron Breakker with Brock Lesnar standing right there is a completely different calculation. But then something unexpected happens. Something that changes the entire dynamic and has the wrestling world absolutely losing their minds right now. CM Punk looks directly at Brock and asks, "Are you here to help him, or are you just here to watch?" It's a direct challenge, forcing Brock to declare his intentions. And Brock Lesnar, without hesitation, without a moment of consideration for the Steiner family connection, responds with something that makes everyone's jaw drop. According to sources who heard it clearly, Brock says, "I'm not here for either of you. Handle your own business." Then Brock crosses his arms and leans against the wall, making it crystal clear that he has no intention of getting involved. Bron's face shows a mixture of shock, confusion, and betrayal. He clearly expected Brock to have his back, or at minimum to run off CM Punk just by being present. But Brock's refusal to help emboldens Punk, who immediately goes on the offensive. Punk starts advancing on Bron, getting in his face, shoving him, daring him to do something. And Bron, now without the backup he thought he had, has to make a decision about whether to fight or walk away. Being young and proud, Bron makes the decision to fight. What happens next is brutal. CM Punk and Bron Breakker start throwing hands right there in the backstage area. It's not a worked wrestling match with clearly defined moves and safe execution. This is two men legitimately trying to hurt each other. Punches are flying. They crash into equipment cases. They slam each other into walls. Production personnel are scrambling to get out of the way. And through it all, Brock Lesnar stands there watching with an expression that's somewhere between amusement and complete indifference. The fight goes on for what feels like forever but is probably closer to 2 or 3 minutes. CM Punk, being the more experienced brawler, starts getting the upper hand. He's landing more shots. He's controlling the positioning. He backs Bron into a corner and starts unleashing a series of strikes that have Bron covering up and trying to protect himself. At multiple points during this beating, Bron looks toward Brock, clearly hoping that seeing him get destroyed will motivate Brock to intervene. But Brock doesn't move. He just keeps watching with those cold, calculating eyes that have intimidated opponents for 2 decades. Finally, CM Punk decides to end it. He grabs Bron and delivers what looks like a modified version of the go to sleep right there on the concrete floor. The impact is sickening. Bron collapses, clearly hurt and disoriented. CM Punk stands over him and says something that the cameras don't quite pick up, but body language suggests it's not complimentary. Then Punk looks directly at Brock and says thanks for not interfering before walking away, leaving Bron Breakker laid out on the ground. Only then, only after CM Punk has left the area, does Brock Lesnar finally move from his spot against the wall. But he doesn't check on Bron. He doesn't help him up. He doesn't call for medical attention. Brock walks over to where Bron is trying to push himself up off the ground, leans down so they're face to face, and according to multiple sources, says something like now you know what it's like when nobody has your back. Welcome to the real world. Then Brock walks away, leaving Bron alone and injured. Now let's break down exactly why this is so controversial and why it's generating such intense debate within the wrestling community. On one hand, you have people who are defending Brock's actions and saying this is exactly what Bron Breakker needed. These people argue that Bron has been coasting on his family name, that he's been pushed too hard too fast, and that he needs to learn how to fight his own battles without expecting handouts or help just because of who his uncles are. They point out that Brock Lesnar built his entire career on being a self-sufficient destroyer who never needed anyone's help. If Bron wants to be taken seriously in the same way Brock is taken seriously, he needs to prove he can handle adversity on his own. This camp also argues that professional wrestling is a cutthroat business and that the old days of locker room unity and wrestlers having each other's backs are long gone. They say Brock is teaching Bron a valuable lesson about not relying on others and not expecting help just because of family connections. They frame this as Brock showing Bron tough love and preparing him for the reality of what it takes to survive at the top level of WWE. Some even suggest that this could be the beginning of a storyline where Brock eventually mentors Bron after Bron proves he has the toughness to earn Brock's respect. On the other hand, and this is where I personally stand, you have people who think what Brock did is absolutely inexcusable and represents everything toxic about modern wrestling culture. The argument here is simple: when you see a fellow wrestler, especially someone whose family is connected to your own history in the business, getting attacked and outnumbered or outmatched, you step in. You help. That's what being part of a locker room community means. That's what respect and brotherhood in professional wrestling is supposed to look like. The people in this camp point out that Brock Lesnar himself has benefited enormously from help and support throughout his career. Paul Heyman has been managing and protecting Brock for years. During his first WWE run, Brock had the full support of management and was given every opportunity to succeed. He didn't build his career entirely alone, so for him to now stand there and watch Bron get destroyed while refusing to help is hypocrisy of the highest order. This isn't tough love. This is selfishness and a complete lack of respect for the bonds that are supposed to exist between wrestlers. There's also a generational aspect to this controversy that can't be ignored. Older wrestling fans remember an era when locker rooms had more solidarity, when veterans looked out for younger wrestlers, and when there was a code of conduct about having each other's backs. Brock Lesnar refusing to help Bron represents the complete abandonment of that code, and it's symptomatic of a larger problem in modern wrestling where everyone is focused purely on their own position and their own paycheck rather than the collective good of the business. The Steiner family connection makes this even more complicated and controversial. Rick Steiner, Bron's father, and Brock Lesnar both came up through WWE around the same time period. While they weren't necessarily close friends, they were contemporaries who respected each other. Scott Steiner and Brock have had interactions over the years and have mutual respect as dominant powerhouse wrestlers. The Steiners are wrestling royalty, a legendary family that's contributed enormously to the business. For Brock to disrespect that legacy by refusing to help Rick Steiner's son is a slap in the face to the entire family. Some people are speculating that there might be legitimate heat between Brock and the Steiner family that we're not aware of. Maybe something happened behind the scenes years ago that created tension. Maybe Brock resents being compared to the Steiners or being associated with them. Maybe there's business or personal issues that have never been made public. If that's the case, it would explain why Brock had no problem watching Bron get beaten down. But if there isn't any real beef, if this is just Brock being selfish and refusing to help for no good reason, that makes it even worse. CM Punk's role in this entire situation is also fascinating. Punk is known for being opportunistic and for taking advantage of any situation that benefits him. By calling out Brock and essentially getting confirmation that Brock wouldn't interfere, Punk got a free pass to attack Bron without consequences. Punk played this perfectly, turning Brock's indifference into an advantage. And now Punk has psychological leverage over Bron, knowing that Bron can't even rely on supposed allies when things get physical. The implications for Bron Breakker's character and status within WWE are significant. Getting beaten down by CM Punk while someone like Brock Lesnar watches and does nothing makes Bron look weak and isolated. It suggests he doesn't have real allies or supporters. It undermines his championship credibility because if he can't even get help when being attacked, how is he supposed to be seen as a dominant champion? WWE needs to be very careful about how they rehabilitate Bron's image after this incident, or they risk permanently damaging his main event potential. There's also the question of how Bron responds to this betrayal. Does he confront Brock and demand an explanation? Does he try to earn Brock's respect through his actions? Does he write off Brock entirely and vow to never ask for or expect help again? Each of these potential responses creates different storytelling opportunities, but they also carry risks. If Bron comes across as whiny or desperate for approval, it makes him look even weaker. If he goes too hard in the other direction and acts like he doesn't need anyone, he risks becoming unsympathetic. The backstage reaction within WWE has reportedly been mixed. Some wrestlers apparently agree with Brock's approach and think Bron needed to be humbled. These wrestlers feel like Bron has been pushed too fast based on his family name rather than earning his spot, and seeing him get knocked down a peg doesn't bother them. Other wrestlers are reportedly disappointed in Brock and feel like he should have shown more solidarity. These wrestlers worry that if Brock can stand by and watch someone get attacked without helping, what does that say about locker room culture? Who can anyone trust if this is how things are going to be? Social media has been predictably chaotic over this incident. Wrestling Twitter is divided into multiple camps arguing about whether Brock was right or wrong, whether Bron deserved what happened, and whether CM Punk is the real winner in all of this. Some fans are creating memes showing Brock just standing there watching with his arms crossed. Others are defending Brock's decision and saying modern wrestlers are too soft and need to learn to handle their own problems. The debate is intense and shows no signs of cooling down. From a storytelling perspective, this incident creates numerous potential directions for WWE to explore. The most obvious is an eventual match between Bron Breakker and CM Punk where Bron gets his revenge and proves he can beat Punk one-on-one. But there's also the possibility of a Bron vs. Brock match down the line, where Bron challenges the man who refused to help him and tries to prove he's just as tough and dominant as the Beast incarnate. That would be a massive match with real heat behind it if built correctly. Another possibility is that this is the beginning of a longer arc where Bron has to essentially earn his place in the main event scene by defeating multiple top stars without any help or support. This could make him a more compelling underdog character and create sympathy from audiences who see him fighting alone against everyone. Eventually, when Bron overcomes all these obstacles and proves himself, it would be a satisfying payoff that justifies everything he went through. There's also potential for exploring the relationship between strength, independence, and asking for help. Wrestling traditionally celebrates the lone wolf tough guy who doesn't need anyone, but real strength sometimes means having allies and being part of a team. WWE could tell a nuanced story about Bron learning when to stand alone and when to build alliances, ultimately becoming a more well-rounded character who's stronger for having connections rather than weaker. The business implications of this angle are worth considering. Brock Lesnar is one of the biggest draws in wrestling history. CM Punk's return to WWE has been massive for business. Bron Breakker is being positioned as a future top star. Having all three of these performers involved in interconnected storylines creates opportunities for huge matches that could main event major pay-per-views and drive subscriptions and ticket sales. But only if WWE capitalizes on the heat and doesn't waste the momentum with poor booking. Looking at this from Brock's perspective, his refusal to help could actually be consistent with his character. Brock has always been portrayed as a mercenary who's motivated primarily by self-interest. He doesn't form attachments easily. He doesn't get involved in other people's business unless there's something in it for him. Viewed through that lens, Brock refusing to help Bron makes perfect sense for his character, even if it's morally questionable. Brock isn't a hero or a role model. He's a beast who cares about dominating opponents and getting paid, and that's it. However, character consistency doesn't necessarily equal good storytelling or positive audience reception. Just because something makes sense for a character doesn't mean it's the right creative decision. WWE needs to consider whether having Brock behave this way serves the larger narrative and whether it creates compelling television that makes people want to tune in next week. If audiences are turned off by Brock's callousness and start seeing him as just a selfish jerk rather than an intimidating force, that could damage his value to the company. The physical toll on Bron from this attack is another element that shouldn't be overlooked. Taking a move like the go to sleep on concrete is legitimately dangerous. Even in a worked environment where wrestlers are being as safe as possible, that kind of impact can cause real injuries. WWE's medical staff would have checked on Bron after this incident, and depending on what they found, he might be dealing with concussion protocols, bruised ribs, or other issues that affect his ability to perform in upcoming shows. There's also the psychological aspect of being abandoned when you need help. Even though this is scripted entertainment, the emotions involved can be very real for the performers. Bron Breakker is still relatively young in his career, and having to play out a scene where someone he expected to have his back completely abandons him could create genuine feelings of vulnerability and isolation that inform his character work moving forward. The best wrestling storytelling happens when the lines between reality and fiction blur, and this situation has that quality. The precedent this sets for future storylines is concerning. If Brock can watch another wrestler get attacked and do nothing, what's to stop other wrestlers from doing the same thing in future situations? WWE is essentially saying that loyalty and solidarity don't matter, that everyone should only look out for themselves, and that expecting help from others is naive. That's a pretty bleak message to send, and it could make future team-up angles or alliance storylines feel hollow because audiences will remember that in WWE's world, nobody actually has anyone's back when it matters. Looking ahead, the resolution of this situation will be crucial. Does Bron eventually earn Brock's respect through his actions? Does Brock reveal that his refusal to help was actually a test? Does Bron reject Brock entirely and succeed despite him rather than because of him? Does CM Punk continue to exploit the division between these two? All of these questions need answers, and how WWE addresses them will determine whether this controversial angle becomes a memorable chapter in wrestling history or just another example of wasted potential. What's absolutely clear is that Brock Lesnar refusing to help Bron Breakker against CM Punk has created one of the most talked about moments in recent WWE history. Whether you think Brock made the right call or the wrong call, whether you believe Bron needed this wake-up call or deserved better, you can't deny that this incident has everyone talking and has created legitimate intrigue about where these stories go next. So here's what I need from you. Tell me in the comments right now, was Brock Lesnar right to refuse to help Bron Breakker, or did he cross a line? Should wrestlers be expected to help each other in situations like this, or is everyone responsible for handling their own business? Who do you think comes out looking best from this situation, Brock, Bron, or CM Punk? And where should WWE take these storylines moving forward? I want to hear every single one of your opinions because I know this is going to be one of the most debated topics in wrestling. If you think Brock made the right call, hit that like button. If you think he should have helped Bron, drop an angry emoji in the comments. Share this video with everyone who needs to weigh in on this controversy. And subscribe to WrestlingNewsCC with notifications on because we're going to be following every development in this story as it continues to unfold. The fallout from this is just beginning, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next.